gentlemen, without further ado, we shall begin our panel discussion. And could I ask the participants for the next round table to come and take their seats? And in the meantime, I just wanted to say a few words of my own. Welcome again to UNESCO. Thank you to the interpreters who are going to be helping us to understand each other in the course of this conference. The interpreters thank the speaker for his kind words. UNESCO, as you know, is an organization with 197 members at present, and you are on international territory here in UNESCO. It's true we're in France, but in these buildings you are actually on international soil. And it's very important to meet here with our different cultures and religions, and perhaps different philosophical approaches. Yesterday, we were able to have a discussion on science and ethics, thanks to a great scholar, Avicenna, and today it'll be a different approach. You've seen in the film how science affects spirituality to some extent, and you can see the panelists now on the podium who will be talking about the contribution of interreligious dialogue in the quest for an establishment of peace. So without further delay, I shall call on Father Guillaume de Bruté de Rémur, but I give the floor forthwith to Father Guillaume for his presentation.
Merci, Père Guillaume.
Thank you, Father Guillaume. Good morning, everybody. So this is a panel which is going to talk about the upshot of a study conducted by the Institut Afrique Monde, the Africa World Institute, on interreligious dialogue in North Africa and its contribution to a culture of peace and peaceful coexistence and harmony, especially in three countries, Tunisia, Egypt, and Morocco. I was personally entrusted by this institute with the task of heading this study with Claude Moselly, who is also with us. And we were able to produce a couple of videos which will be showing at the same time as the panelist presentations, panelists who we met during this study, and I think their experience will prove interesting. So I'll begin my presentation firstly by thanking the Institut Afrique Monde for the trust they vested in me. I'd also like to thank the Association of Friends of Master Ching Kung in UNESCO, who funded us and allowed us to carry out this research so that we could present it to you today. So the second decade of the 21st century in the Arab countries was marked by what today is known as the Arab Spring, and these revolutions did not necessarily have the same origins or indeed the same effects. The Syrian revolution, for example, triggered a civil war which is still going on today, and its effects are being felt well beyond its borders. Whereas the Tunisian revolution slowly seems to be bearing the fruits of pluralism and democracy in the country. However, there is one constant among all these revolutions: the importance of the religious aspect in the societies that underwent these changes. Political Islam has been key in this situation, and the fate of religious minorities has often showed how important change has been. And in the light of these changes, there's inevitably important questions. Have religions a role to play in the current situation? Are they vehicles of conflict or catalysts for peace and reconciliation? Are they at the origin of conflict, or are they part of the solution to the problem? Interreligious dialogue, is it a useful tool, or indeed an essential one, for building a peaceful, tolerant society? The Institut Afrique Monde had already last year embarked upon a study on interreligious dialogue in North Africa as a vehicle for dialogue, mutual understanding and peace. Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, Togo were the first targets for this study in West Africa. That study is continuing in Benin, Côte d'Ivoire and Senegal, with in-depth work expanding the scope to coexistence in target areas. And it's in the same spirit and with the same approach and with the same methodological démarche that the idea was to expand the scope of this study to other geographical areas, and the choice of North Africa, which is has a Muslim majority, bears witness to the upheaval in the Arab states in recent years, and it was an obvious place to choose. And as we were put in charge of this study, we had to select the countries we were going to study, because North Africa stretches from Morocco across to Egypt, so it's a huge area and a large study, so we had to choose 3 countries. Egypt, Tunisia and Morocco were selected for the following reasons. Tunisia seems to be succeeding in its spring with affirmation of its secularism and a clear-cut distinction between the constitution and Quranic law. Nonetheless, it's also been one of the countries which has contributed most fighters to Islamic State, Daesh, in the conflicts in Iraq and Syria, and other radical movements which we can see in the Middle East. So it's interesting to see this country, which is very secular in nature and which asserts that secular dimension, and which is seeking a civil society which is not influenced by religious division, at least in terms of social rules, but at the same time it's a country which has generated radical Islamism and, above all, degradation of the Muslim faith with the departure of many foreign fighters to that region. Egypt is in a special place because it's the only North African country with a major indigenous Christian community, the Copts, who account for some 10% of the population, we think. And they were in the country before Islam arrived. They've always played an important role in the country's history. The political regime in Egypt was inherited from Pan-Arabism and recognized the Quran as a basis for social rules, nonetheless had a separation between religion and the structure of the state. Morocco has other characteristics. It's a monarchy of divine origin, which gives the king the role of commander of the believers, and he's the guarantor of religious practice as a whole. And the stability of Morocco in the face of all the turmoil in North Africa also differentiates that country from the other 2 which we studied. Moreover, 2 major events confirmed that this was an important choice. The first was a visit to Morocco in March last year of His Holiness the Pope Francis at the invitation of King Mohammed VI, and then the meeting in Abu Dhabi between the great Imam of the Al-Azhar Mosque, Sheikh Al-Tayyib, who signed the Declaration on Fraternity. So those 2 events were a sign that these countries had something important to contribute, and they could be examples when talking about interreligious dialogue in North African societies. We carried out 3 study trips. We met many players in the interreligious dialogue. We weren't able to bring them all here. We selected 3, an Egyptian, a Moroccan, and a Tunisian. Somebody who works in Tunisia. We asked a lot of questions. We had lots of meetings. And I hope that this short presentation and this introduction to our panelists will give you some idea of what we were able to ascertain. In this study, we highlighted the fact that in each country there were specific features. There was a revolution in Tunisia, so we can't say there was an interreligious dialogue before the Jasmine Revolution, and then there's after that revolution with a radical change in the way in which the communities interact, and awareness, a realization in society of the importance of multiculturalism and the communion in relations between the different religious communities.
In Egypt, as I mentioned, the Egyptian social fabric has a very secular presence of the Coptic Church, which really shaped Egyptian identity. And they inherited a culture which was also transmitted to the Egyptians. This is Muslim culture. And it's also there's also an important institution in the Muslim world, which is the Al-Azhar University, so therefore we can see 2 very important actors who are engaging in interreligious dialogue, and I will tell you more about at what level we will see that. Morocco has another characteristic, which is very marked action on behalf of the state, the Moroccan monarchy, which organizes exchanges and dialogues and is promoting a series of initiatives in society in order to try to highlight multiculturalism and the importance of interreligious dialogue in society. These are some of the characteristics of each of the countries. I'm not going to go into detail because it would take up too much time, and our report is over 60 pages long, so I'm not going to read all of it to you. But I just wanted to skip to the conclusion, which is our conclusion of the study, and it brings together a few key elements. Thanks to the study, we have seen that different countries have various experiences with interreligious dialogue. Generally, they have been very productive, leading to a more tolerant society of coexistence. So there is no single model which could be implemented everywhere, and we can't guarantee that any such model would be effective. However, this diversity of experiences is brought together by some underlying themes, which we viewed as a series of criteria to ensure the feasibility of interreligious dialogue, and as some of the key themes that would ensure its success. First of all, we can see that interreligious dialogue has 2 key dimensions. The first is a personal dimension, and the second is a social and collective dimension. Of course, in order to engage in exchanges between different religions, we have to have we have to have a group, a place of exchange between people, different religions, different cultures. And if we don't have such a we, so to speak, if the social dimension is absent, then there can be no dialogue. Engaging in dialogue is also, of course, a personal experience. There has to be a self, an I, which meets another self. And this I, this self, meets others within the we. And then we can engage in dialogue and decide to start such a dialogue. Our study looked into the social consequences of dialogue, but it's important not to forget that the individual dimension also involves an interpersonal one. A great French philosopher who passed away not long ago, Michel Serres, stated that if one person has bread, another person has a euro, it's easy to understand how the commercial relationship will develop between them. One of them will spend €1 to get the bread, and the person who has the bread will give up his bread in exchange for the euro. Nothing is enhanced, nothing is increased. Each person receives what the other gives him. So this is a so-called business exchange or commercial exchange. In interreligious dialogue, things are different. If one individual has knowledge which the other doesn't, by sharing this knowledge, by sharing this experience, he who shares does not lose it. And he who receives actually becomes enriched by this experience or knowledge. He receives something that he did not know previously. In the first exchange, which I described, nothing is added, nothing is created, whereas in the second exchange there is a so-called increase, and that is what culture and human progress is. Each I, each self, each individual can enrich him or herself by engaging in dialogue, and this is beneficial to all. So we can see that these are two dimensions which seem important to us, a personal dimension and a grouped dynamic. We also realize that this interreligious dialogue can be broken up into 3 basic levels. The first level, which was mentioned by all of the people whom we met, which is the dialogue of life. In other words, exchanges between people, meeting each other, links created by social closeness, social proximity. It is the basis of all dialogue, and it applies to everyone and all of society. The dialogue of life, the life of exchanges and meeting different people through daily life, through, for example, going to the bakery to buy bread, by walking around in the street, by talking to your neighbors. This dialogue leads to 2 other levels of dialogue, which converge in the dialogue of daily life. So the dialogue of daily life is a basic dialogue, which is the building block for the higher levels. And then these higher level dialogues, they actually cross-fertilize with the dialogue of daily life. So what are these 2 other dialogues? The first level, the first higher level, is the dialogue of doing together. There have been many initiatives launched in the countries we visited in which various religions have come together to do something together. Often it is organized on the personal initiative of someone, or it can be a community project focused on education, health, human rights, or, for example, upholding the rights of minorities. Doing together means undertaking concrete actions, and it is not institutional. It is only organized by the organization which organized it, for example, libraries, schools, etc. It's very interesting because religions working together is extremely important, especially if we want to build a tolerant culture and a society of coexistence. And then the third level of dialogue, a higher level, once again, it is a bit more institutional, and this is the dialogue of thinking together and of speaking together, sharing ideas, sharing beliefs. Often it is the realm of more educated communities, sometimes it can be spontaneous. Often it takes place in relatively institutionalized context. And this dialogue consists in discussing faith, discussing our different visions of history, society, and the values that arise from these. This is what we think of often when we talk about interfaith dialogue. And in our study, the first thing that I did was to look for these places of exchange where people talked and discussed their ideas. And quickly I realized that it was actually just a tiny part of the dialogue that takes place in cities and our daily lives. And I realized that the dialogue of doing together is just as important. Sharing ideas, discussing our ideas, is the best example of how people can meet each other in a peaceful manner and can actually turn it into a source of wealth. However, this dialogue of ideas and beliefs cannot exist without the other two. It is the product of the other two dialogues, and it also creates new opportunities for these other levels. We wondered during the course of our study whether there might be a fourth level of dialogue, a more spiritual level of common prayer, of praying together. We saw some places where believers of different faiths gathered together for a prayer, just like we did yesterday morning at the ancestor worship ceremony. However, we saw that this was still rather unusual. In other words, it takes place at specific times. It's a one-time event. It's not something that's used as a tool for bringing people together. So it's not really a form of dialogue. Rather, it's the product of these other three levels which I just mentioned. In other words, when these three levels lead to some kind of result, often this result is an event where believers come together and engage in a religious activity. It can be a common activity, or it can be an activity belonging to one of these particular faiths. For example, we have seen different processions, the Jewish festival, other religions which gather other believers, or iftar during Ramadan, which bring together players and believers of different faiths. So there are specific times when each religion, during a celebration or during a prayer, invites followers of other faiths to join in the celebration. After we identified the two dimensions and the three levels, we realized that the quality of dialogue and the efficiency, the effectiveness of this dialogue were linked to certain criteria. The first point, the first criterion, is how people experience their religion. And of course, there's a broad spectrum of possibilities here. It is difficult to engage, or even impossible to engage in dialogue, when religion is experienced as a closed form of identity which has to be defended. In these types of contexts, usually people emphasize external religion, external religious practices, rather than a real spirituality. And so religious signs, religious symbolism becomes more important for these people. Other religions are viewed as a threat, sometimes as an anomaly, or even an aberration which has to be destroyed. In the base case scenario, people ignore other religions. In the worst case scenarios, they attempt to destroy it. Sometimes we ostracize this religion by placing it into boxes, into ghettos, and in the worst case scenario, people try to eliminate it. As the opposite of this, there is another type of faith which is experienced as a kind of opening to the world, and an opening up to people living in this world. In this case, religious practice is no longer an external refuge, but rather it is an opportunity for welcoming and listening to others. It becomes an expression of spirituality, of individual spirituality, and religious symbolism, which in these other situations symbolize separation and being separated from others, they become symbols of welcoming and listening. Other religions are viewed as a source of wealth, as an opportunity for engaging in spiritual exchange, and this is the optimal framework for true interreligious dialogue. The problem is that this is not always the case. And between these two extremes, which I described, there is a whole spectrum of religious activity which goes from being completely closed off from the world to completely open to it. The goal of interreligious dialogue initiatives is to move the arrow from being more closed to being more open. And within this framework, there are many factors which help us or prevent us from moving the scale. Action through dialogue action concerning these different factors is extremely important because it allows us to promote improved interaction between different religions and thereby to contribute to a more peaceful society living in harmony where interreligious exchanges take place in a natural and constructive manner. We have examined these different factors, and before concluding my presentation, I just wanted to highlight a few important ones. In any case, these are the ones that were mentioned in our study in the studied countries, because I know that we really focused on just one part of the world, but it's still of interest, I believe. So one of the first aspects which stood out to us is the significance of so-called community demographics. In other words, there's quite a big difference between countries depending on the makeup of different religious groups. For example, in Egypt, there are 10% native Christians, and this creates a certain characteristic which we saw in the organization called Beit el-Aila. It's an organization, an Islamic Christian organization which works to promote the defense of Egyptian identity by incorporating both members of the Muslim faith and the Christian faith. This is very interesting because Christians only account for 10% of the population, but they're still reflected in this Beit el-Aila organization, which was promoted by Al-Azhar and by the Coptics. So this high percentage of Christians in Tunisia means that Christians accept that a organization representing Egypt has the same number of people of different faiths. So these proportions are very important because even if Christians are not a majority, they're still considered an important minority, an important part of Egyptian society. For example, in Tunisia and in Morocco, this is not the case. This doesn't mean that there is no dialogue, it just means that it takes on a different form. For example, in Morocco, it's the king, it's the monarchy that encourages and creates structures for dialogue and calls on communities to engage in exchange and dialogue. So it's a Muslim initiative. Now there are some initiatives where Muslims and Christians work together and engage in exchanges with each other, but in the beginning it's always something that begins with a royal initiative. At least that is the impression that we had. So this is an important aspect. Now it seems that the presence of diverse communities with a certain demographic presence helps dialogue become successful. Multiculturalism helps bring out other levels of dialogue. Moreover, in an extremely connected world where cultural barriers are slowly disappearing, countries are becoming more and more interconnected as well, and this helps them address diversity within their countries. And this helps give up this temptation to come up with black and white countries. This is the wrong understanding because countries with just one religion are much less able to manage their relations with other countries compared with religiously diverse countries. In other words, a wealth of faiths helps countries connect with other countries. This kind of isolation only increases the risk of conflict if nationalism is added to the mix. Another important aspect is the history of the country and the history of the relationships between different faith communities. For example, the decolonization of Tunisia and the association of the Christian community with the colonial presence are an example of history as either a positive or a negative factor with respect to interreligious dialogue. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the Gulf Wars, especially the former, influenced intercommunitarian relations in the countries we visited. For example, a Tunisian told me that in the beginning I thought I was a Tunisian, that's how I identified, but then later, because of the Gulf War, we were forced to identify as Arabs, as Muslims, and we lost our cultural identity, the identity of Tunisia with its wealth and its cultural diversity, because we become associated with just one group, with just part of our identity. Of course, we are Arabs, we are Muslims, but we're not just that. We have something else. We have a common history in Tunisia, so historical elements are extremely important. Although conflicts have created fissures and have even caused mistrust or hatred, we have also seen that conflict has spurred some initiatives for dialogue. For example, in Tunisia, there is the KEF reading group, which was organized during the outbreak of the first Gulf War. At the time, people were responding to a clash of civilizations, and these women who formed this group responded in a particular manner. Also in Egypt, the Beit al-Ila was founded, which is also a black mark on Egyptian history. Numerous people with whom we spoke stated that the birth of the Islamic State, a disaster, led to many Muslims, including religious leaders, to realize that they need to ask themselves about what are the internal causes of this phenomenon, and they realized the need to engage in dialogue with Christians in order to fight against this extremism, which was viewed as an aberration and having nothing to do with real Islam. Society, when it is shaken by interfaith conflict, is paralyzed in terms of its society and dialogue, the everyday kind of dialogue. Geographic diversity can lead to the creation of ghettos. For example, in Lebanon, after the Civil War, there were some communities which grew together. The Christian neighborhoods and the Muslim neighborhoods became very isolated. So it's extremely important for there to be a strong driving force, for example, the state or intellectual elites behind dialogue at the third level, the sharing of ideas. There needs to be a review of history with a joint responsibility with respect to conflict, especially a review of a common history. This is often the solution. Now, we're sure that intercommunitarian, interfaith conflicts, they create trauma and they mark people, which actually increase people's lack of acceptance of the other. They are obstacles to dialogue, but at the same time, we have to ask ourselves why violence arises and how we can use this to promote thought, to promote initiatives of dialogue among the often silent majority. Any society is able to be resilient, and this resilience is highlighted by dialogue. Another aspect is the experience of the people. As I told you just now, the dialogue of everyday life was something that was mentioned by all of the participants in our study. And it was often related to a kind of nostalgic feeling of a time when it was easier to live together. The three countries which we visited gave us numerous examples of how popular memory and the everyday experiences of people are extremely important in creating a productive dialogue to establish peace. Religious dialogues that are festive, for example, pilgrimages, processions, festivals, are great platforms for popular involvement. In Tunisia, for example, there was the procession of August 15th in La Goulette. We also saw it in the music festival in Morocco and all of the cultural initiatives which were organized. We saw that all of these events created these feelings of joy in society, of living together, of coexistence. So these past experiences are an experience that marks the present days of these people. Now, it's important to see that over the course of history, places where there was interreligious interaction are those which are often targeted by people who refuse this diversity. Often we have even seen conflicts that come externally from the society that target these places of interaction between religions. They try to destroy these platforms and make them lose their interfaith function. And here it's important to support any initiatives which have a positive impact on exchanges in society. Without these everyday experiences, without people's experience that it's possible to coexist, which is something that can create a collective memory, it's very difficult to engage in productive dialogue. And here it's very important to remember a fourth factor, which is political will. Now, given everything that we have said, we can see that political will has a very important role, and a very good example of this is Morocco, where when the government believes that social stability is upheld by interreligious dialogue, we have seen that there have been many initiatives of working together and sharing. This, of course, impacts all of society. Another big challenge is the credibility of political institutions. It is only if they are credible that political will can have a real impact. If the political will is too weak, or if it's absent, then this dialogue cannot take place. It's very difficult to organize it. Also, the reforms of cultural elites can also play an important role. We have seen that political elites sometimes need to be reformed so that they can move forward and remove this obstacle. And of course, political will is not the only factor. It's important to remember that it cannot have an impact if it is not welcomed by the people. And the last factor which I wanted to mention is that of education and culture. Now, the intellectual elite and social structures are very important in organizing dialogue. And we know that it can also prevent, it can be a counterweight to the lack of political will. It's also too important to remember that we can rely on educated individuals. These players help us counter extremism and ideologues. Our study showed that education and culture are extremely important for dialogue and to make sure that it continues. Places of education and cultural education are also places where people meet each other and exchange in dialogue. It's important for us to remember that we need to focus on education, especially in the education of children, to create a culture of dialogue in society. It is from the earliest ages that we can transmit values of openness and tolerance. A good education gives people access to historical knowledge, and it's important to understand what the goals of education are, as they are essential to creating a culture of dialogue. Here we have to draw a distinction between education and teaching, between culture and knowledge. When education simply consists of the passing on of knowledge, and if education does not address the meaning of knowledge and culture, then we can question the usefulness of such an education. In Latin, education means elevating something, bringing it to a higher level, and knowledge is only part of this. We have to have meaning ascribed to knowledge, and this is the true goal of education. In the cultural institutions which we visited, which are platforms for interreligious dialogue, we were struck by the importance of history, the history of religions, the history of countries, the history of cultures. Cicero said, Historia magistra vitae. History is the master of life. The great challenge of interreligious dialogue, as we saw, is whether a country can able to tell the same story using different voices, so that for future generations, it is something that is acceptable to all. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to create a common history given the diversity of our societies, because of course it is somewhat subjective. And imagine if your culture is extremely diverse and includes people from different religions and cultures, and that is why places that preserve memories, for example, libraries, are key to the success of dialogue. Diversity and the freedom to engage in research are key, and they can help us create a truly inclusive culture that can promote dialogue. Before concluding my presentation, And before showing you a quick video, I just wanted to make a very important point, which applies to all of our research. In addition to learning about people's experiences, throughout all of our experiences, we have realized that dialogue has to happen freely. And we have heard that many people said that some of the main obstacles on the path to dialogue were personal interest, political interest, and economic interest. However, in order to succeed, dialogue cannot be associated with any specific interest. It should serve the common interest, which must be based on the freedom of meeting others. And this freedom has to be based on love for which we are all striving. Love which has no prerequisites, but which gives us so much. It is the only force behind forgiveness. This is what's called agape. Before giving the floor to our panelists, I just wanted to show you a quick video which we created, because one of the themes which we mentioned was violence in these societies. Many of these societies are experiencing intercommunitarian, interreligious violence. And these platforms for exchange between Christians and Muslims, interreligious dialogue, is key to addressing the problem of violence. So we will show you a brief video. I'm just going to say that the purpose of this video is just to show you how in Egypt we met with some victims of attacks perpetrated by people who had nothing to do with Islam, but were simply seeking to create tensions between Muslims and Christians. So we wanted to share some of the experiences that we learned about, places that preserve memories, for example, libraries and cultural centers, which we visited, and these were very important places in all of the 3 countries which we visited. So I just wanted to show you this quick video before giving the floor to Professor Nabil, who will tell us more about cultural initiatives, and the other panelists who will tell us about their experiences. We will conclude by viewing another short video in which we will hear some of the stories of the people we met while conducting our study.
What happened that day? Actually, it was a very good day, and we were going to pray as a family together. It was a very relaxing day and calm day, and actually we was like living in a part of heaven. And then by the made of a man, it changed like a part of hell. And then I remember that my mother and my sister was in the church. So I then ran to them, and then I found my mother is dead actually. And then I decided to carry my sister and run with her, but she didn't make it at the end of the day, and that's what happened.
L'absence de dialogue débouche presque toujours sur la violence fondamentaliste, la violence terroriste. Qu'est-ce qu'une bombe? Une bombe, c'est une parole avortée, une parole de mort, une parole qui anéantit l'autre qui est en face de nous, une parole qui, au lieu de donner la vie, donne la mort. Alors, qu'est-ce que le contraire d'une bombe?
pas mentionné, mais il faut le dire, en 2015 d'ailleurs, quand on a commencé à travailler avec Al-Azhar, c'est leur initiative, c'est pas la nôtre. Ouais. C'est eux qui sont venus nous chercher. C'est ça. Et ça, c'est typiquement les cas dernières années. C'est très impressionnant. On organise une journée porte ouverte. Il n'y a que des musulmans qui viennent voir comment on vit dans un couvent. J'ai été visiter l'Institut d'études coptes à Alexandrie. C'est que des musulmans qui font des études coptes, etc. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a depuis 2015, peut-être 2014-2015, une soif de diversité. Et je pense qu'il y a clairement un contre-effet d'Arèche, c'est-à-dire que l'unité et l'uniformité, ça tue littéralement. Et je pense que ce qui menace le dialogue, c'est le double langage, c'est-à-dire, dans la mesure du possible, mais de ne pas tenir deux langages. Il n'y a pas un langage pour les musulmans, un langage pour les chrétiens, c'est le même langage. Parce que sinon, on perd toute crédibilité. Si on arrive à dire la même chose, et je reconnais que ce n'est pas toujours facile, mais si on arrive à dire la même chose devant une audience de musulmans, une audience de chrétiens, une audience mixte, et que ce qu'on dit en privé, en public, alors là, c'est ça qui menace le dialogue. Parce que si les gens, on a beaucoup de paranoïa dans le cas, si quelqu'un se rend compte qu'on dit des choses devant tout le monde et qu'en privé on dit autre chose, alors là, ça explose. Alors si on veut mettre encore la barre encore plus haut, est-ce qu'on est capable de raconter ensemble la même histoire? Ça, c'est extrêmement compliqué. Est-ce qu'on peut ensemble raconter ce qui s'est passé? Mon christianisme, il est maintenant, il est passé à un crible de nouvelles questions, de nouvelles problématiques, etc. Si je reprends la question du droit de Dieu, c'est-à-dire que moi, ça m'a beaucoup interpellé cette histoire. Parce que quand je me suis rendu compte que c'était si important pour les musulmans ici et que ça n'intéressait aucun chrétien, je me suis dit, mais en fait, est-ce que vraiment on peut dire comme ça simplement? Est-ce que moi, j'entends bien, je ne parle pas en tant que théoricien ou historien ou islamologue ou rien, est-ce que vraiment je crois que Dieu n'a aucun droit? Est-ce qu'il a renoncé? Et tout d'un coup, je commence à voir ma foi d'une autre manière. C'est-à-dire que tout d'un coup, l'islam m'interroge. Enfin, c'est obligé, on ne peut pas étudier, rencontrer des gens, avoir des amitiés profondes comme ça pendant 20 ans et rester un bloc.
Conserver un livre dans une bibliothèque, c'est affirmer l'importance de l'idée qu'il contient. C'est aussi juger que le message qu'il porte mérite d'être connu, d'être transmis. Les bombes détruisent les murs de pierre, mais construisent entre les croyants des murs de souffrance, les murs des préjugés, les murs de la méfiance, les murs de la non-écoute. Une bibliothèque, par contre, elle, a souvent la mission de créer des ponts de vérité. À Fès, dans cette vieille bibliothèque patrimoine mondial de l'UNESCO, est conservé un évangile écrit en langue arabe de plus de 1000 ans, juste à côté d'un manuscrit du Coran parmi les plus précieux.
I primi anni mi sono interessato dell'armeno Poi piano piano ho visto che venivano a chiedere traduzioni dal latino. E allora ho inclinato a questo là perché ho visto che è molto interessante. E così è nata questa attività di traduzione dal latino per aiutare questi dottorandi. La maggioranza sono musulmani, ma anche c'è dal francese, dall'italiano o dall'armeno anche qualche volta. I campi più richiesti sono il bizantino, il mondo bizantino, perché fu il primo incontro tra gli arabi e il mondo bizantino. In genere i musulmani partono da un punto di vista religioso, quindi a loro interessa come l'incontro tra il mondo islamico e il mondo cristiano di bizantini. Poi un altro campo molto richiesto sono i crociati. Vogliono sapere perché queste guerre in genere le considerano come guerre di conquista, mentre i cristiani li considerano una guerra di difesa. Si sentono molto riconoscenti. Quindi poi questi sono l'intelligenza, questi insegnano sia nelle università, quelli più bravi, e quelli sia nei licei, quindi si fa un apostolato indiretto di vicinanza,
Une bombe détruit l'héritage, détruit le futur. Une bibliothèque, par contre, a la mission de garder et de transmettre l'héritage commun, l'héritage futur. Ici, à Djerba, une famille musulmane, celle de M. Saïd Baroumi, a recueilli tous les manuscrits et tous les livres que sa famille conservait depuis des années et a créé une bibliothèque ouverte à tous, où tous peuvent venir gratuitement les consulter.
أنا فهيم حلمي فهيم، والد الشهيدتين مارينا فهيم وفبرونيا فهيم من شهداء البطرسية في أحداث 11/12/2016. ليه الناس بتعمل كده؟ بص، أنا في الحقيقة أنا عايز أقول إن في الطبيعي وفي عموم حياتنا، إحنا حياتنا مقترنة مسلم بمسيحي، وده مش بقوله نفاق أو رياء، وده حقيقي يعني. إنما المشكلة إن في ناس بتدعي إنها صاحبة علم وبتقول إن هو ده العلم وهو ده الدين وهو ده المعتقد، وبيدوا ناسهم فكر إن الجهاد في سبيل الله هو قتل الكافر أو اللي ما هوش على نفس الدين. المشكلة هنا مش في اللي بينفذ على فكرة، لأن اللي بينفذ ده إنسان ضعيف جدا، هو محتاج قرشين، محتاج تعبان جاهل، فالكبير ده بيستغل جهل واحتياج الإنسان وياخده ينفذ بيه أغراض في دماغه هو. إيه هي الأغراض دي مش معروفة، إنما إحنا لو عايزين نفكر في الموضوع صح ونجيب أساسه نشوف مين اللي بيحرض على كده. فالمشكلة إن إحنا لازم نشوف فكر ده جاي منين، مصدره إيه، وإن ما كناش نجيب المصادر دي أساسها ونعلمها أو نقتلعها تماما، إحنا هنتننا في اللي إحنا فيه ومش هنتغير.
أنا اسمي عماد أمين، والد الشهيدة فيرينا عماد وزوج الشهيدة مدلين توفيق. كون ان احنا نعيش مع الاخرين المسلمين ده شيء طبيعي، ده الشيء العادي عندنا. احنا اتعودنا ان احنا نعيش معاهم، مفيش فرق كبير ما بيننا وما بينهم، لا في الملابس ولا في العادات ولا في التقاليد ولا في الحياة المختلفة. يعني انا بتكلم الكلام ده عن المسلمين العاديين اللي مفيش حد بيقعد يغذي فكرهم بفكر ان دولت كفار ودولت سيئين ودولت انجاس ودولت اسوأ ناس ممكن يشوفوهم. الناس العاديين صدقني ممكن بنتعامل معاهم كأنهم اخواتنا، مفيش فرق. ده العادي في مصر، تقدرش تفرق ما بين واحد مسلم وواحد مسيحي لو ماشيين في الشارع، ما تقدرش تفرق ما بينهم قوي. اما عن اللي قتلوا اولادنا، فان كان على المغفره احنا لازم نغفر، لازم نسامح. لكن سامحني لو اقول لك مش هقدر احب اللي قتلوا اولادي ومراتي. داود النبي بيقول اغضبوا ولا تخطئوا. ممكن اغضب لكن مش هغلط فيه. انا لو انتقمت منه يبقى هغلط فيه، فبالتالي انا ما اقدرش اضطهده. حتى لو لقيته جعان او عطشان واجب عليا ان انا اكله واشربه.
اللهم اجعلنا مستحقين ان نكون بشكر.
أبانا الذي في السماوات ليتقدس اسمك، ليأتي ملكوتك، لتكن مشيئتك كما في السماء كذلك على الأرض. خبزنا الذي للغد أعطينا اليوم، واغفر لنا ذنوبنا كما نغفر نحن أيضا للمذنبين إلينا، ولا تدخلنا في تجربة لكن نجينا من الشرير، بالمسيح يسوع ربنا، لأن لك الملك والقوة والمجد إلى الأبد آمين.
Le dialogue interreligieux pose la question de la relation, du dialogue. Mais on ne peut pas évacuer de la question du dialogue interreligieux la question de la transmission de la parole. Pour cela, je pense vraiment que les bibliothèques, les livres, les centres culturels, les endroits où les chrétiens, les musulmans, les juifs se retrouvent autour de leurs livres, autour de leur histoire, sont des lieux fondamentaux pour la construction d'une société qui vit en paix, qui vit ensemble, en harmonie. Alors, le contraire d'une bombe, c'est une parole qui se donne, une parole qui se transmet, une parole qui construit. Le contraire d'une bombe, c'est un bon livre, c'est une bibliothèque. En Tunisie, en Égypte, au Maroc, nous avons rencontré des expériences de dialogue interreligieux qui marchent discrètement, sans bruit. Elles portent une parole plus forte que l'éclat d'une bombe. Une parole qui renforce les croyants. Une parole qui répond à une question inéluctable. Comment peut-on vivre ensemble?
The answer of all of that is love. Love teaches us how to accept each other, how to know the point of view of each other. So how can we live together? I think by trying to accept each other, to make like schools or universities who accept all the races, all the religions. If there is schools or universities that are for one religion or one race, then this is teaching hate. This is not teaching love. So if you want to love in one society, this is the first one big problem, that we don't have love. So how to have love? I think like I have mentioned before.
Inaudible. So we shall now call on Professor Nabil, who I'm sure will shed light in a very interesting way on what's happening in Egypt.
Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, I'd like to express warm thanks to Her Excellency the Ambassador Denise Houphouët-Boigny for having invited me to attend today. I'd also like to thank Father Guillaume de Bruté de Rémur for his cooperation. He was the bridge, as it were, between Al-Azhar University and the Africa World Institute. So a huge thank you for all these endeavors. Before starting my presentation, I will take the liberty of making a brief comment on the video which has just been shown. Yes, we all know that in 2011 and 2012, Egypt went through a very difficult time, upheaval, hesitation, which is not the case today. And I should also stress that the whole of Egypt was affected by extremism. And if we've just seen a major church being blown up, the extremists did not hesitate to kill 300 people in a mosque in the Sinai. So Egyptians are being targeted, Egypt is being targeted. And it's not only the Christians or only the Muslims, it's our society which is being targeted. And Islamism has taken Egypt as its enemy, and Egypt has done what was needed to thwart this terrorist movement, supported by secret services and countries. We maybe not be able to spell them out because we don't know, we don't have the requisite documentation to accuse anyone or accuse a specific country. Today I'd like to bear witness and for the period covering 2014 to 2019, when I was director of the French department at the university. In 2015, I was a delegate to Al-Mamar, which is the headquarters of Al-Azhar, headed by the great Imam of Al-Azhar, to establish the observatory and monitoring center, whose language is French. And this position allowed me to expand the scope of academic research and to apply it on the ground to the field. You have two pictures showing how we ran this observatory in combating extremism, and the aim was to study Daesh's publications, IS's publications, to correct the mistakes, the mistaken interpretations propagated by these people across the world. And our research workers, of whom there were 60 to 70, speaking at least four different languages, they managed in 6 months to get a clear understanding of Daesh's thinking, and we were able to publish articles in 7 languages indicating the danger they posed to the world at large and the Muslim world in particular. The publication of these articles wasn't enough. It didn't suffice to combat the mistaken notions being propagated by Daesh across the networks. We had to go out into the field to explain to people what true Islam was. And for 2 years, peace caravans, peace convoys went all across the Western and Eastern worlds, and delegations addressed Muslims and non-Muslims alike, and religious bodies as well as civil associations. And the photo on the right was taken in a school near Limoges. You know France better than I do. It was a lesson on Islam in general. The other photograph is a group of Islamologists in Barcelona who teach Islamology for a master's degree. So that was the start of the practical conduct of our dialogue. Now, I had the honor to lead 2 peace convoys in France, the first in Paris at the Senate in 2015, and our delegation had an opportunity to meet the members of the National Assembly and refer to the danger posed by Daesh to the world at large, and stress the importance of France and Egypt's cooperation in saving the world from extremism. So this was at the Senate in 2015. Our second meeting was at the Paris Catholic Institute, the Institut Catholique de Paris, the ICP. Monsignor Philippe Bourdain, the Dean of the University, welcomed us, hosted us, and this meeting paved the way for a signed agreement in May 2016. Before talking about this agreement between the Al-Azhar University and the ICP, I should absolutely refer to the historic encounter which took place in the Vatican between His Holiness the Pope, Pope Francis, and His Eminence, the Professor Ahmed Al-Tayeb, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, in October 2016. And this was a very important step, paving the way for this dialogue of peace. And this meeting between these 2 leaders of Christianity and Islam paved the way for other encounters between religious men in order to bolster the ties between peoples. Now, I can't remember, but I arranged my presentation around some pictures, photos, memories. And this article was on the future of the dialogue between Al-Azhar and the Vatican. I wrote it, I published it a month after the Grand Imam's visit to the Vatican. This was a wish of mine to break down the barriers, and fortunately God heeded my pleas, and there is the result. This meeting took place and I had the honor and pleasure of attending. 2 days later, what's interesting is that on the 25th of June 2016, the Dean of the University of Al-Azhar, Professor Ibrahim Al-Hodhod, and the Dean of the ICP, Monsignor Philippe Bourdain, publicly signed a memorandum of understanding in the presence of the Ambassador of Egypt in France and other intellectuals, which you can see in the picture. So that was the group of us at the time of the signature. And this memorandum of understanding provides for participation of members of the teachers in both universities in research activities, joint research activities, in translating literary studies and medieval studies, as well as in the field of intercultural dialogue. 2 brief stays of teachers in the schools provided for them, gave them the possibility to attend seminars and various training courses organized by both parties. And according to the rules in force, this allowed for an exchange of university publications and documents, scientific documents, on areas of research. And this agreement, which is blessed, as it were, by the 2 religious leaders, paves the way for a dialogue of culture and civilizations amongst researchers on both sides, and paved the way to another memorandum of understanding with the Dominican Oriental Studies Institute, and was signed on the 27th of November in the presence of the head of Al-Azhar University and a gentleman you've just seen in the video. And this agreement reflects a scientific compilation of our centre's activities, taking into account the following areas, the following themes: the history of Muslim literature, the place of reason in religious discourse in Islam and Christianity, erroneous interpretations of violence in the modern world, the principles on which Islam bases its relations with others, the question of religious minorities, and areas of common ground between Western civilization and the Arab Muslim civilization. These themes were discussed in workshops with academics from both sides, as well as graduate students. There was an exchange of visits between the 2 institutes, and the joint publication of research and the organization of symposia in Egypt and abroad. And all of these points were carried out, and we are still working. We haven't stopped, and I'm sure Father Guillaume can vouch for that.
Voilà quelques images qui...
So here are some of the photos which demonstrate the joint activities we carry out. We also, as you can see, receive delegations comprising religious thinkers and French intellectuals. All of this demonstrates that religious bodies, in all their forms, have a mission to perform and a responsibility to shoulder vis-à-vis peoples and vis-à-vis God. And the second peace convoy took place in 2017 following the murder of Father Jacques Emile. An Al-Azhar delegation went to Rouen in France to present to the Archbishop of the Rouen Diocese condolences, and also denounce this inhuman murder. So this was the reception. And on that occasion, we visited the church where the priest was murdered in order to meet the inhabitants of the town and to express our solidarity with them. And inside the church itself, I had the honor and pleasure of saying a few words in front of the picture in the church, a painting which was offered, I think, by a French Muslim. I don't have the photograph at present, but in front of this painting, I said a few words to the community of that parish. And it was the most important stopover, as it were, for that peace caravan, that peace convoy, and it was a proper dialogue with the inhabitants of the town. Our visit to the Great Mosque in Lyon was also very useful. We spoke to the head of the Great Mosque, organizing a conference, bringing together Muslim intellectuals and non-Muslim thinkers. Now, I think we stopped in 5 places, starting with the ICP, with a conference, and then Rouen, then Nantes, and then Lyon. But our job doesn't stop there, our work didn't stop there. We continued this work in a different fashion, with exchanges with other universities. Here's an example. This is a class at the Sorbonne, at the political science faculty, a lesson on interreligious dialogue for graduate students. And we began at the school level and then continued in the universities and higher education institutions, especially for science, political science students. And I've done this 3 times at the political science faculty. And I can assure you that the students and the academics are very keen to know more about each other, Muslims and people from other denominations, and students from other countries. But they're all eager for knowledge, to know more about others. And I receive lots of questions about Islam, about Egyptian society, about the political relations between Egypt and other countries, and above all with France. And they also asked questions about concepts such as polygamy in Islam, which is an interesting subject for young people to find out how Islam authorizes a man to marry 4 women. Well, it doesn't usually happen. It's not the way it goes. But academics get their information from the media, and we all know that the media do not reflect the actual facts. They tend to present things in a different way. And so the dialogue is not confined to lectures or discussions among religious thinkers, but also professors and academics. And it called for a reform in religious dialogue and a rejection of hate speech. And Al-Azhar calls on all schools of thought in Islam, Christianity and Judaism to reread the sacred texts in the light of a spiritual and rational principle alike. And there's one sentence I keep on repeating. The revelations have 2 objectives. And when I talk about revelations, I'm talking about the revealed books, the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah. and the relationship between man and God, and the relationship among all human beings, irrespective of their beliefs. That is why it was with great pleasure that I accepted an invitation to participate in a meeting in 2018 to talk about human fraternity in the presence of 2,000 young people from different religious backgrounds. So this was July 2018. And it was a wonderful opportunity to meet young people from different faiths, asking every conceivable question about all religions. It's an experience which gave me more than I actually gave myself. And I've done my utmost to put academic life at the service of human life. And to conclude, may I close with a sentence from a French writer who I like a great deal. Many French people have forgotten him, Jean Giraudoux, who worked for peace during the Second World War. He says in one of his books, a guardian of peace is nothing if he is not a guardian of life. Thank you very much.
Donnons la parole à
Now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. GHAYET from Morocco, who's the president of the Moroccans Pluriels Association. You have the floor.
Salam alaikum. Bonjour. Shalom.
Hello. My name is Ahmed, and I don't normally talk about religion. Yes, I'm a believer. However, while engaging in intercultural dialogue, I realized that my own faith was being deepened, and the more I interacted with other religions, the more I was comforted in my own beliefs and in my respect of other religions. I realized that we should not leave religions to those who misappropriate it, and we should use religion for peace. So today I would like to speak to you about spirituality. We must place spirituality at the heart of our young people. Young people, in the face of their fascination with death, need to find a meaning in life. And one thing which I am sure of, and this is something which I would like to share with you, is that peace can only be achieved with, for, and by young people. We're all here to accomplish something. My generation was the so-called TV generation. We were children of the television. And today, the young people are the internet generation. That is something that we can be sure of. So all of these technologies create an opportunity to augment the evil in us. Alas, some people with bad intentions are successfully using new technology to spread hate, to encourage rejection of the other, to divide us. They use the tools at hand. They use computer keyboards to create weapons. And this is the threat which I think we should try to stand up to today. All of us have the opportunity to do so, and I will tell you how. The challenge we are facing today is something that we as adults should give to the younger generations, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Jews, Buddhists, atheists, which is that we need to transmit to them a spirituality, the spirituality that earlier generations tried to give to us, so that we don't leave these young people behind, because if we leave them behind, we will be threatening our own futures. Often, our young people are living amongst themselves within their communities. And today, not only are they living within themselves with other members of their communities, but they are also somewhat isolated from other communities on social media. So we need to use new technologies to have a presence on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, so that we can see what they love, what they publish, what they enjoy reading. Very few people can do this. And today I'm going to tell you about the tools that will allow us to take action. For example, what does a young Christian do in Morocco today? He interacts with other Europeans, he interacts with them, but he does not interact with many other communities. So people who know about Christians, they know that Christians, they think that Christians are misguided, but what they don't understand is that they're simply different. Young people from sub-Saharan Africa who are moving to Morocco, often they are students or they are migrants. Or sometimes they are migrants who are transitioning through Morocco on their way to Europe in search of their dreams. And unfortunately, many of them are perishing on the Mediterranean. What does a young Moroccan know of Jews? Yes, there are Moroccan Jews. They have Moroccan citizenships. They are Moroccans. But what do Moroccans know about Jews? Well, they don't know much about them. They only know what satellite TV tells them on satellite television channels. For them, Jews are associated with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And Moroccans don't know that just in the next door there might be a Moroccan Jew living next to him. All of this leads to misunderstanding, to people being misled, and this breeds fear, and of course fear breeds hatred and violence. Morocco is standing up to this rejection of others, hatred, racism. Morocco is standing up to these more than other countries thanks to two tools. First is the political will of the Moroccan king. I assure you, our king wants to promote interreligious dialogue. And this is very helpful to us because, first of all, it helps us to take action, but also it protects us. It's like an umbrella over our heads. Not everyone shares this desire for interreligious dialogue with us. And let me give you a very telling example. For months, together with young people from different Moroccan cities, we have been preparing a project, the olive tree planting project. So we were going to plant olive trees in front of a mosque, a church, and a synagogue. And this is actually very challenging. In some cities on the ground, we have encountered some challenges. It was our luck that in March, this was supposed to take place in April, or in March, the king invited Pope Francis for an official 3-day visit. And this really was comforting to us. Many of us encounter problems on the ground, but we felt that the king was supporting us and that we were simply following in the steps of the king. This was the logical conclusion to this official visit. So he helped us carry out this program, and it was a beautiful program. Planting an olive tree with the help of a rabbi or an imam, a priest, Buddhists. This had a great impact because it was broadcast on television. Young people spoke about it on social media, and there was one young person who participated in planting an olive tree in front of a church. His name was Yusuf. In his neighborhood, people called him Joseph. But most importantly, people were talking about this. And once again, what you can see is the impact of social media. This is why here, among friends, I just wanted to say that it was too bad that the ceremony that took place here yesterday, a beautiful ceremony, was not broadcast on social media. I think it would have been wonderful if we could have allowed all of these young people who use Instagram, Facebook, YouTube to see this ceremony. If we could have capitalized on these social media and not letting them fall into the hands of evil. Morocco is also standing up to these evil forces thanks to our identity and our history. We have centuries of experience of coexistence, of diversity, and living in a pluralist society. In the preamble of the Moroccan constitution, actually, diversity is enshrined in this preamble, and very few countries have been successful in this regard. Our identity, our heritage should not be taken for granted. It's something that is constantly facing challenges, and today I assure you that evildoers want to question and threaten our legacy. Some people view it as with nostalgia. People think that things were better before, but we have to move forward and live in the present. Some people think that our heritage is something that is frozen in time, but that's not true. We have to experience it. We should enrich it. We should ensure that we can then transmit it to future generations. And I'm going to cite another example because it's important to me, and I share it with young people with whom we work on the ground. Our parents and our families have experienced wonderful things. For example, often there was a Muslim and a Christian family living together within the same courtyard. And when one of the mothers was gone, the other would feed her children, would actually breastfeed her children. Muslim mothers would feed Jewish children and vice versa, and this was beautiful. When I tell young people about it today, people living in these neighborhoods, they are really surprised and moved by the stories like this. Yesterday, I talked to some of you over lunch, and I'll mention it here, that it's very important to use different opportunities. For example, joint celebrations. It's a wonderful opportunity to engage in sharing and exchanges. And in Morocco, we have also tried to cement our role using these types of channels. For example, 10 years ago, we decided that we have two main goals. One, help young people capitalize on their talents, help them live independently. And every time we work together with a neighborhood, with a school, we try to encourage young people to form their own organizations, their community organizations. The second goal was coexistence, promoting coexistence. We knew that we would face challenges, and we were right. Today, 10 years later, I have realized that actually these two goals are just one goal. They can be connected and made into one. Young people can only be happy, they can only blossom if they can open up to the outside world and if they learn about other people. Coexistence is only possible if these young people are happy and blossom as well. So if we cannot help young people, then this will threaten the very concept of coexistence. In conclusion, I will just give you a few more examples of some of our activities. I am confident that the best defense against hatred, against the rejection of the other, against xenophobia, is culture. Culture, culture, culture. Culture is the solution, culture is the key. And the best evidence that we have for this is our discussions with young people. People who want to brainwash our young people, who want to recruit our young people, what do? if they want to transform our young people into robots, they cut them off from society, they cut them off from culture, they cut them off from motherly love. And this is what turns people into robotic beings. Of course, here I mean culture, broadly speaking. This includes art, theater, dance, music. Dance is such a beautiful way of expressing ourselves. Also, cuisine. And yesterday at lunch, I mentioned that I was very happy to share the meal yesterday with so many young people. And also, opening up to other people means that you have to study foreign languages. Our young people need help in becoming multilingual. Some people are illiterate in their native tongues. Here you can see some photos of our programs. We group them under two categories: large events, which we use to tell people about our philosophy since they're covered in the media, and another type of event which I would call local intercultural, interreligious organizations. These are events that take place on the ground, and this is where we need your help to work together with the local populations. When we host large events, of course, we had the visit of Pope Francis to Morocco, and I fought so that 10 people from different cities in Morocco could meet with Pope Francis during his visit, and so that they could give him a gift, a plant that only grows in Morocco to symbolize interreligious dialogue. It only grows in a city where the population made sure that the church bells could ring on Sunday. It's the only city where church bells ring on Sunday, every Sunday in Morocco. So we were able to offer the symbol of hope and of peace to Francis. And I'll tell you another story which I haven't shared with anyone yet. We didn't know how we would speak with Pope Francis. We spoke Arabic and French, and he spoke French poorly and he didn't speak any Arabic. But then we managed to find a common language. We understood each other. And at the end, the Pope brought us close to him, and there were some young people, and he told us in French. The Pope said this to young Muslims. He said, "Pray for me." It was really beautiful. Once a month, we also have a Café Politis. We have a special coffee hour where we bring together several hundred young people and give them the opportunity to meet with a politician or an artist, journalists, people whom they tend to see on TV or read about in newspapers. We invite them and allow them to engage in exchanges. And I have a wonderful story where we invited an imam, a priest, and a rabbi. 500 young people took part, and this dialogue took place for 3 hours. Do you know what happened? All of these young people went to take selfies with the priest and the rabbi. They completely forgot about the imam. And this is only normal because, of course, they were very familiar with the imam, with Islam, but they were very curious about the rabbi and the priest. And this last Café Politis that we had, we hosted an Archbishop, Monsignor the Cardinal, and I really wanted to thank him and congratulate the Archbishop of who became Cardinal and who supported our interreligious dialogue. And he came, he was wearing his robes, and there were young people who came up to him and asked him whether he was the Pope. And he said, well, not really. So these kinds of stories make it possible to coexist. And every year during Ramadan, we set up tables in a cafe and we set up a meal for the local populations. We invite Jews, Muslims, Christians to share this meal together. On the ground, we have young people from sub-Saharan Africa, young Muslims who attend schools, who attend services, young Jews who sing in the synagogue, and we have been able to bring together all of these young people and create an interreligious chorus. I told you about our fraternity program. We also make galettes. We baptize them brotherhood cakes, brotherhood galettes. We have various activities with religious groups, and we allow young people from different religions to meet each other. I know I have spoken for quite a long time, so I just wanted to conclude by saying a prayer. I wanted a non-denominational prayer here to you. As soon as we can find a way to communicate, as long as we know that they exist, you have to tell people about what we are doing here. Let's learn about social media. Let's use the internet to spread the word. We cannot give up in the face of those who are spreading hate. Let's bring spirituality back. Let's not forget about these young people who are tempted by drugs, by hatred. There are boats in the Mediterranean which are a dream for some people, and I wanted to call on you to try to understand what I'm trying to say. Let's not give up on our young people. Thank you very much.
Je voudrais saluer un grand ami.
And I just wanted to say a few words about a great friend of mine who's coming here this afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you.
Nous sommes désolés de ce retard occasionné aussi par le début de cette conférence.
And we're sorry about this delay. I just wanted to give the floor to Father LANDO, Father Abbé Matteo LANDO. Thank you very much for your presentation. And in the end, I just wanted to show you a final short video which will allow us to conclude the morning session.
Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon. I would first like to thank Father Guillaume for inviting me to this conference, and also the Institut Afrique Monde and the Association of Friends of Master Chinkung, which sponsored our research and made this conference possible. So my name is Matteo LANDO. I'm the third of 7 sons. My parents are Catholics, and I entered a seminary to heed the call of God. It's an international seminary which prepares missionaries in Lebanon, and I was trained there. Underwent a Presbyterian training, which happens in a hands-on context. There are seminarists from different countries, and there are different types of Catholics. There are Maronites and other Catholics. In 2015, I was ordained a priest for the Maronites in Byblos in Lebanon. And since September 2017, on the demand of the Archbishop Antonia Azzi, I have been working in the Catholic Church of Djerba in Tunisia. With my presentation today, I would like to tell you about the situation in Djerba with respect to interreligious dialogue. I will give you a brief historical overview. It'll be very brief. And then I'm going to tell you about some events we organized promoting intercultural, interreligious dialogue over the past several years. And then I will conclude with a few thoughts. Djerba has some special characteristics. It's in southern Tunisia. It's not far from the rest of the continent. It's very much interconnected with it. It has a strategic position on the Mediterranean. And it is there, it was the crossroads of different people, nations, languages, cultures over centuries. There used to be Berbers, Jews, Muslims, Catholics who were Italian, French, and there were also Orthodox Christians. I have met many people personally who are quite nostalgic about these times when people were free to be themselves and coexist with each other. including in terms of religion, and they forged true bonds of friendship. I'll give you some specific examples. For example, there was one person from Malta who told me that during the World War II there was a bomb raid on the island, and Muslims who were living in the countryside, they opened up their homes to provide refuge for residents of the city who were mostly Muslims and Jewish. So I arrived in 2017 in Djerba, and during my first mass, the bishop was also there, and also a committee of local residents with Muslims and Jews welcomed me to their parish, and this was really touching for me, that the fact that they were opening the door up for me and welcoming me. This was our first meeting, and afterwards we had many more exchanges, and all of them were characterized by a willingness to engage, to welcome me. As a priest, I felt very much welcomed in the city, and I could feel their desire, this will felt by everyone to have an open church, a church that would be open and available to everyone, because for various reasons it had been a bit closed off. And even after it was consecrated again in 2005, this church was usually closed except for major holidays. And so I felt that I had to also create an environment where the residents of Djerba who had access to this church, they felt that it was part of their heritage. Mr. Ouabid was the co-founder of an organization for preserving the heritage of Djerba, and he wanted to bring some foreign visitors to the church. At the time, it wasn't possible. The mosques were all closed at the time, so he wasn't able to visit the mosques either. The doors were closed. So as a sign of the reopening of the church, we organized a Christmas concert, a specific event, and local residents, young local residents, attended the concert, and they asked me if they could take part in it. So we organized this concert, and the church was full of Jews and Christians, people of all faiths, and we organized this traditional Christmas performance. And there were also people who performed gospel songs, and I thought it was funny to see that in Italy we were talking about the importance of these types of interreligious events where we express respect for other people of other faiths. In May, there was a Jewish holiday, which was mentioned by Father Guillaume. This is Agbalmer. It's 33 days after Jewish Easter. So we also hosted large celebrations in which many people participated. And in Djerba, we worked together with the Jewish community and the women of all religious faiths. They have a tradition where they write their wishes on eggs and they lay them out on that day. And this is something that is supposed to bode well for their fertility. And in that year, it coincided with Ramadan. So the authorities organized iftar locally, and they invited me as the representative of the Catholic Church. The same year, the Minister of Religious Affairs also organized an evening of dialogue, which involved different religious leaders, including myself. Every year, it's an opportunity for us to meet each other at the institutional level. Also, numerous schools came to visit the church. We have a choir, which is also an opportunity for young people to learn about history and people of other faiths. And there was also the regional director, Mr. Andramo, for religious affairs, who participated in this project. In June, he invited me to the closing ceremony of the Katatib. This is a Quran school for young children. And he thought it was important for me to be present so that these children and their families could see that we're engaging in dialogue. So what I want to tell you is about these interfaith events, and all of these events were preceded and followed by personal encounters at the market, at the post office. At Djerba, we still have a village atmosphere, and everybody knows everybody else. We say hello in the streets. As Mr. Wabid was saying, he was working together with me. And in Djerba, I truly gained an appreciation for my education in my family, and then at the seminary, I realized how important it was. Especially in a context where there were other players, but it was possible to meet each other and learn about each other. Of course, we had tensions, they're still there, but there is this possibility of reaching a reconciliation after a particular conflict. We really embody an attitude of openness towards the other, with a capital O. We try to use the tools at our disposal to maintain an open attitude. And of course, I have my Christian identity, and yet I do not feel threatened by the faith of others. As one thinker said, extremists are people who feel insecure in their identity, and they express this insecurity via violence towards others. And I wanted to say that when we look at the history of the Orthodox Church, one thinker said that, well, the vital space is a very small space. It can be looked at as a cell that can reproduce itself. And the membrane is a very important part of the cell. The membrane has two important functions. It creates a separate, well-protected space, but at the same time, it helps the inside of the cell connect to the outside. And the same thing is true of our societies. Each of us, if we want to remain healthy, we have to be somewhat separate from the others. We have to have our own identity, our own space. But at the same time, we need to be able to communicate with the rest of our social body so that we can function together as a whole. Otherwise, we could die, or worse, we could create a cancer that threatens all of society. And this was the concern of the church in Tunisia. The church wanted to serve society and support social development and all of its aspects. Here I'm thinking of many fathers, many priests who have worked hard to found libraries for everyone's use, but also priests from France, Italy, and other countries who have shared this mission. In Djerba, I think it's extremely important to meet with families, to connect with families, and individuals who embody their faith, who are believers, so that we can exchange amongst ourselves. And this experience is something we should embody in our lives and in our daily encounters. And here I will conclude my presentation with a quote by a native Tunisian from Sousse. And this sentence is as follows. It is our true belief that the Catholic Church is a pillar of our Tunisian identity, and its emancipation and influence can help ensure social harmony to which we all inspire. And Father Nicholas then states that our conviction can help all minorities in the country to create social harmony, which we try to strengthen while learning about each other's differences. Thank you.
Would you like to say something quickly? Yes, thank you. I'm Amr Abdallah. From the permanent delegation of Egypt to UNESCO. Could the speaker take his headset away from the microphone? I'd like to thank the organisers and the panelists for these very interesting presentations. I have a couple of comments on the video and the remarks from Dr. Nabil. In Egypt, we say that dialogue is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end to bring about tangible results, a sincere dialogue which will change people's lives. And our aim in Egypt, whether it's dialogue which is external or internal, domestic, is to uphold and retain Egypt's identity, a very diverse culture and history which everybody knows about in the world. So we are convinced that we have a common destiny. Of course, I'm not at all surprised by the testimony from our Egyptian Tunisian friends, because it's the same spirit which prevails in Egypt. So this is nothing new to me. Professor Oussama rightly said, Professor Nabil said, the victims are not just Christian, they're also Muslim victims. It's the Egyptians that are targets, not the fact they're Muslim or Christian. And in that context, I would like to make it clear that the state, the government, has launched a reform process regarding religious thinking. It's a very far-reaching process to combat terrorism and extremism, which may stem from a wrongful interpretation of sacred texts. And I can assure you that Egypt historically has played a very strong role in the heritage of our religion and our history, and will always be a bulwark in combating terrorism, in defense of humanity. Thank you.
Pour terminer.
And to conclude, we'll have this brief video which will end the morning's proceedings.
Alors, qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire dirigeant pour le dialogue interreligieux?
Le dialogue pour moi.
Alors pour moi le dialogue c'est.
Pour moi le dialogue c'est.
Le dialogue interreligieux, ce qui est important, c'est.
Alors moi je suis évêque ici en Tunisie.
Je suis Asma Mira, membre du GRIC Tunis depuis 2005, la coprésidente musulmane du GRIC international.
Je m'appelle Jacques Sebac, je suis rabbin d'une communauté.
Les urgences pour le dialogue au Maroc.
Je suis Père Matteo LANDO.
Ça fait 25 ans que je suis en Tunisie.
Donc, en tout cas ici au Maroc, crois que c'est...
Les difficultés du dialogue.
Notre sœur Josette, qui a vécu 40 ans au Caire, nous a répété tout le temps.
Qui concerne tous les chrétiens et tous les musulmans.
This is from our life.
Bon, je suis là pour vous répondre à vos questions.
Je vais chez le boulanger. Bon. Et je lui dis, Barakallahu fik. Ce qui veut dire que Dieu te bénisse. Et il me fait un sourire, je ne vous dis pas lequel, d'avoir une bénédiction venue par une sœur étrangère d'une autre religion. J'ai dit, il est sur la même longueur d'onde que moi. C'est en ce sens que je vois le dialogue islamo-chrétien.
De parler la même langue que les autres. Parler la même langue, ça veut dire une langue qui peut être comprise, un langage plutôt qui peut être compris par les autres.
Le bien ne fait pas beaucoup de bruit, et le bruit ne fait pas beaucoup de bien. Et pour moi, un des éléments importants, c'est l'écoute.
C'est la rencontre interpersonnelle qui donne comme résultat l'amitié et qui fait tomber les préjugés.
C'est de mieux se connaître, que nous connaissions mieux les musulmans, que nous connaissions mieux l'islam, et que les musulmans aussi nous connaissent mieux. Et là, il y a des préjugés qui tombent.
Le dialogue, c'est l'écoute de l'autre.
Une écoute très profonde, parce que je suis sûre que Dieu nous parle à travers ça. Enfin, moi, j'en suis sûre.
L'estime et le respect de l'autre, c'est aimer l'autre et aller à sa rencontre pour établir une relation fraternelle.
Quelqu'un dans le groupe de volontaires français dont je faisais partie avait demandé à une vieille sœur irlandaise qui était là depuis 60 ans, qu'est-ce qui vous a fait rester dans ce pays pendant 60 ans? Et il s'attendait à une réponse bien structurée, bien développée sur la théologie du dialogue, la spiritualité de la mission, etc. La sœur, très simplement, lui a répondu « Oh, c'est simple, ça fait 60 ans que j'essaye d'aimer les gens. » Ça m'a tellement marqué que je pense que c'est une des raisons pour lesquelles je suis resté. Et au bout du compte, on peut avoir toutes les théologies que l'on veut. Ce qui est essentiel, c'est d'abord ça. Le reste, on découvre.
Alors pour moi, le dialogue, c'est la vie de tous les jours. C'est se lever le matin, parler avec les gens, avoir des gestes envers les gens et rester dans la simplicité, dans l'humain.
À vivre tous les jours avec des personnes avant de théoriser, mais c'est une chose très concrète. Moi, je la vis tous les jours dans ma vie, avec les voisins, dans les marchés. Et je peux dire qu'en s'ouvrant à l'autre, on ne perd jamais. Au contraire.
Pour grandir dans la vérité, j'ai besoin de la vérité de l'autre. Nous ne posséderons jamais la vérité, nous avons besoin des autres et de l'expérience croyante de l'autre pour grandir dans la vérité de Dieu qui n'appartient à personne.
Nous, on nous considère comme des gens étant très haut placés, mais en fait, quelquefois, il nous arrive de ne pas savoir parler le même langage, de ne pas utiliser les mêmes mots, et d'où l'importance du langage.
J'ai été nommé évêque pour la Tunisie, pour tout le monde. Et je suis fier d'être ici parce que je constate que la Tunisie, c'est une mission, un pays qui s'ouvre de plus en plus aux autres. Avant, on se sentait un peu ignoré, maintenant on sent qu'on peut coopérer ensemble, travailler ensemble.
L'ignorance, le fanatisme, l'extrémisme, le refus de l'autre, ce sont les ennemis du dialogue. Donc il faut battre.
Avant, je voyais les chrétiens, c'est des mécréants.
Ah oui.
Et les musulmans, c'est la religion de Dieu.
Ils vont aller au paradis.
Oui, ils vont aller au paradis, les autres
en enfer.
Maintenant, tout a changé complètement.
Nous irons tous au paradis.
On ira tous au paradis. Inch'Allah.
L'activité au sein de ce groupe est importante. D'abord parce que cela nous permet de dépasser les stéréotypes. Donc on se rapproche en tant que croyants. Et ça nous permet aussi de réfléchir ensemble, en tant que croyants, chacun dans sa religion, sur les problèmes du monde contemporain.
Si je pouvais utiliser un exemple, justement, je prendrais l'exemple de deux pêcheurs, un pêcheur polonais et un pêcheur sicilien. Je les mettrai en face l'un de l'autre et je constaterai que l'un est en Baltique et l'autre en Méditerranée, que leurs bateaux ne sont pas les mêmes, que les poissons qu'ils pêchent ne sont pas les mêmes et que leur manière d'être n'est pas la même. Seulement, je constaterai que les deux font partie du même espace politique, l'Union européenne, et les deux appartiennent à la même religion, le catholicisme. Je prendrai maintenant mon pêcheur sicilien avec un pêcheur de Tunisie, de Mahdi, de n'importe quelle région. Je les mettrai ensemble et vous constaterez que d'abord, ils parlent le même langage lorsqu'il s'agit de poissons, que leurs barques sont similaires, que leurs techniques de pêche sont similaires et généralement héritées depuis la nuit des temps, et que malheureusement, ils n'appartiennent pas au même espace géopolitique, ni à la même religion, mais qu'ils se comprennent à la perfection. Et je dirais, ils se comprennent tellement qu'en Tunisie, nous avons une procession chaque année le 15 août à la Goulette, et que cette procession, il était de tradition qu'elle soit suivie non seulement par les chrétiens, mais aussi par les juifs et les musulmans, qui eux aussi voulaient bénéficier de la protection de la Madonna di Trapani.
Le monde actuel nécessite la communication et un dialogue entre les différentes communautés, surtout que la religion est toujours présentée comme un obstacle et comme une cause des conflits, alors que je suis convaincue que c'est tout à fait le contraire.
On a une très belle expérience qu'on vit à Oujda. Il y a un espace de prière pour les chrétiens qui est coupé en trois avec des rideaux. Selon le monde qu'il y a, on ouvre, on ferme les rideaux. D'un côté du rideau, on a mis un espace de prière pour les musulmans qui habitent à l'église. Et on a eu à plusieurs reprises cette expérience. Nous sommes en prière entre chrétiens, en adoration eucharistique, ou pendant la messe. Et tout d'un coup, de l'autre côté du rideau, les sourates du Coran qui montent. Parce que l'espace de prière des musulmans est habité par ces jeunes musulmans qui viennent prier. Et on se retrouve chacun d'un côté du rideau à prier le même Dieu sur des chemins différents. Et ça nous donne une complicité dans cette démarche de foi qui fait qu'au-delà de nos démarches différentes, eh bien, on est content d'être là et d'être là croyant, chacun d'un côté du rideau. Et un jour, on va pousser le rideau et on sera dans le même espace.
Ce qui est urgent pour le dialogue, c'est l'éducation. Il faut la refonte et la réforme du système éducatif pour pouvoir enseigner aux enfants que l'autre n'est pas mauvais, que l'autre n'est pas méchant. Et malheureusement aujourd'hui, certaines télévisions et certains programmes dans le monde enseignent la haine. Et c'est ça qu'il faut combattre.
Nous devons aimer les musulmans d'abord. Aimer.
The honesty of heart.
Ce qui est important, c'est que chacun commence à son propre niveau. Si on est un dignitaire religieux, faire ça avec d'autres dignitaires religieux. Si on est un universitaire, de faire ça avec d'autres universitaires. Si on est un mari, de faire ça avec sa femme. Si on est de faire ça avec ses amis. Que chacun, dans son milieu, là où il est, commence. Il ne faut pas attendre que ça vienne d'ailleurs. Ça ne vient jamais d'ailleurs. Ça commence par moi, ça commence par chacun de nous.
And I think this will be a lesson how to have peace. And our world need to a little peace. And I think this is the message of our Lord Jesus Christ. He is a Prince of Peace.
Merci beaucoup, merci Père Guillaume.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Father Guillaume, for chairing this roundtable. Let's give another round of applause to these promoters of peace in a region which is experiencing some difficulty.
Ainsi,
this is the end of our panel for today.